The Illinois solar program went from a mere 80 megawatts in 2017 to over 1.5 gigawatts of installations in 2021. My guest today on the Clean Power Hour is Anthony Starr. He is a repeat guest. He is the former director of the Illinois Power Agency, the agency that oversees the renewable energy programs that includes solar, wind, and to some extent battery storage here in Illinois. Check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Please give us a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify. That helps others find this content, which is so vital. We are growing the energy transition by tens and tens of thousands of people, and this is vital information for energy professionals. Welcome to the show, Anthony Starr.
Thank you. Well, nice to be here.
Great to see you again, and looking forward to giving our listeners a quick update on Illinois solar. You know, we have what's known as Illinois Shines, or the adjustable block program that most of my solar colleagues are very familiar with. There's also the Solar for All program, and then other programs. But we're going to give our listeners a quick update on what's going on, because we got major new legislation last year in 2021, known as CEJA, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, which greatly expands our renewable portfolio standard. And as any solar or energy professional knows, a good RPS is the foundation for a good renewable energy program. So for our listeners, would you give us a little background on your role and the agency's role?
Sure. So my role in all of this is that until September of this year, I've been the director of the Illinois Power Agency since 2013. I've now moved into a new role as a senior advisor to the agency and the interim bureau chief for our planning and procurement bureau. The IPA's role in the Illinois RPS is that we're the state agency tasked with running programs and running procurements to meet the goals of the Illinois RPS. We do this through setting out plans for how we do that in what's known as our long-term renewable resources procurement plan, a long, detailed document that we then submit to the Illinois Commerce Commission for approval, and then it goes through a regulatory proceeding there, and ultimately that becomes the guidance for how we administer programs. Illinois, as a state, we had developed this model going back to 2007 when the Illinois Power Agency was created, where we run procurements for certain types of resources for the utilities. And then there are the buyers of whether it may be energy for our energy procurements, it may be renewable energy credits when it comes to the RPS. So we have this model set out where the utilities are the ones collecting funds from their ratepayers to fund the renewable portfolio standard. The IPA administers the procurements and programs, and the ICC has a regulatory oversight role over all of this. And this model has evolved over the years, significant changes with the Future Energy Jobs Act back in 2016, 2017, that really revamped a lot of the Illinois RPS, created the adjustable block program, the Illinois Solar for All program, and the model of us having a long-term renewable resources plan, which is one that's updated every 2 years. And then that was significantly updated again last fall through CEJA, which made some updates to have technical fixes to ways in which funding is allocated, as well as brought in significant new aspects to our programs in terms of new categories and a commitment on equity in the industry.
Yeah, we have a very good RPS now, and this started in 2008, approximately with a 25% by 2025 RPS, and now we're gunning for what, 40% by 2035? Is that right?
40% by 2030, with then a sort of additional goal to get to 50% by 2040.
Okay. And that's referring to wind and solar specifically, or including other resources?
So the RPS in Illinois has a definition of eligible renewable resources that goes beyond just wind and solar. But then when you look at the specific programs that the IPA and procurements that the IPA is tasked to do, they focus on just wind and solar. So the activities we're undertaking are focused on the procurement of RECs from new wind and solar projects. I think one of the issues with the RPS prior to the Future Energy Jobs Act is it had a structure that pushed us towards procuring RECs from existing resources on short-term basis rather than what we have now, first through CEJA now and refined through CEJA, which are an emphasis on procuring RECs from new resources to help spur the change in the energy economy.
We're now about 5 going on 6 years into the modern era of renewables in Illinois. We have approximately 1.5 gigawatts of solar installations in the state. You can learn more by Googling SEIA Illinois fact sheet. They have a nice fact sheet, and they link to a nationwide database on solar projects and solar companies, so check that out. But this new legislation, includes something like 650 megawatts of distributed generation at least a year. So it's really a game changer, and it's very heady days. If you're, a nonprofit, a school, a facility owner, you very much can take advantage of renewable energy now. There are very few barriers to entry, and this is very good. It's good for the economy. It's good for reducing air pollution. And of course, it's good for ultimately stepping back from the brink of climate chaos. So in your words, though, Anthony, how has the program gone? How did it go, compared to how you thought it might go, I guess? And then what do you see in your crystal ball for the coming years?
Well, we've obviously seen a huge increase in the amount of solar in Illinois, both at the utility scale level and as well as for distributed generation and increasingly more and more community solar projects coming online. So at one simple level, if the goal is to increase the amount of renewables in Illinois, that was jump-started through CEJA, and we're seeing huge increases. Now, there's a lot of lessons learned. I think there's a lot about how community solar projects are developed that led to a large rush of applications back in 2019. One of the things CEJA has done is sort of carve out 2 different paths for community solar, giving us a more objective criteria on how to select projects rather than just first come, first serve. So there's a lot of things that are adjusting that way. The other thing that obviously would be remiss not to mention is the impact of COVID. Like so many parts of our culture and economy, it had huge impact on the solar industry, with development grinding to a halt for a substantial period of time, and the ongoing delays that it's still creating in supply chains, interconnection approvals. So while we've had a lot of success, some stuff is not where I think we thought it would be, and I think we can't separate out the impact of COVID on sort of the fundamental changes to our economy.
Yeah.
In terms of going forward, one of the significant aspects of CEJA is there were some technical aspects of CEJA in terms of how funding was collected, used, and then any unused funding returned to customers that sort of was creating bottlenecks. So I think one of the things that I'm excited about from CEJA is that it fixed some of the accounting treatments of funding for renewables, as well as increase the amount of funding collected each year. And so that's one of those things that I think will be very helpful sort of in the long term, putting together a path forward for the ongoing significant expansions that we'll need to see to meet our RPS goals.
Yeah, let's touch on this. The program is funded by a fee on consumer power bills. So if you're a consumer or a business owner in the IOUs, that's Ameren, ComEd, and MidAmerican, look on your power bill and you will see a small fee, and it is identified as a renewable portfolio standard fee or something like that, or renewable energy fee. And that was capped, I think, at 2%. The cap is now what?
Oh, it's I should know it off the top of my head. I believe it's 4-point-something%. I'm forgetting.
Yeah, it's over 4%.
The percentage, yes.
So we doubled the funding.
It also, the other key part of that is the base. So a percentage has to be a percentage of something. So the baseline that the percentage is calculated against also was reset. And the combination of the two resulted in more than doubling the annual funding collected by the utilities.
Yeah. And one of the other major shifts, so to speak, in the new legislation last year in 2021, this is what we call CEJA, not to be confused with FEJA. FEJA was part one starting in 2017, Future Energy Jobs Act. Now we have CEJA, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. CEJA includes carve-outs for schools, for community-driven solar, and for equity-eligible contractors. Can you touch on those three things and why those are important to the Illinois economy?
Sure. I think they're each important in their own way. So starting with schools, one of the challenges that schools have as they're looking at solar is the decision-making process for installing solar at a government facility, which a school in essence is going to be very different from the decisions that that private sector actors can make in terms of when they sign contracts, how they want to move forward. So I think the idea of carving out a portion of the program for schools that may again have a different pathways towards deciding versus private sector projects, I think was a very valuable part of CEJA, and one that will help ensure that schools all across the state have solar projects. That's still very much in its infancy. I think, again, because of the longer decision-making timeline that schools have, we are not yet seeing significant activity in that aspect of the adjustable block program. But I'm sure it will come along as schools work through their proposals they get for developing solar and start submitting them in. The second one you mentioned was what's known as community-driven community solar. I think this is also really significant because there's different models and different visions for what community solar might be. And the initial model we had from the Future Energy Jobs Act, which was sort of an open the door, so let applications come in, really pushed community solar projects towards greenfield sites. So it made sense for a developer to look for somewhere where they could find the 15 to 20 acres they might need close to a good interconnection point. And those tended to be greenfield sites, not necessarily located close to where the customers who are subscribing to the community solar projects might be located. So it achieved the goals of the concept of a community solar project where you can have subscribers subscribe to a share of a larger project, but the community piece of community solar maybe is a bit weaker in that model. So in CEJA, having what's known as community-driven community solar, where we have criteria for projects that focus on connections to the communities where the subscribers are likely to be, I think sort of puts the word community back front and center in community solar projects. That aspect of the adjustable block program is one where we have an application window, and then we will be evaluating and scoring projects. So again, we're still sort of waiting to see what comes in there, but I'm confident that we'll see strong participation and a real increase in community solar projects that are more tightly tied to the communities where their subscribers are located in. The third leg you mentioned is the concept of equity eligible contractors. And this again is an important part of CEJA in that it reserves a portion of the adjustable block program from projects submitted by what are known as equity eligible contractors. And these are contractors where there's a definition of what are known as equity eligible persons in the law. It's a combination of someone who maybe has come through one of the job training or workforce development programs, someone who lives in an environmental justice or what's known as R3 community. Again, communities that in a variety of different ways have disproportionately felt the impact of environmental and socioeconomic pressures, or also people who are formerly incarcerated or coming out of the foster care system. So again, this is a way where the intent of the General Assembly, as I understand it, was to broaden the scope of companies working in clean energy space, developing projects, being the beneficiary of contracts to sell renewable energy credits. So by having this carve out, it sort of expands the pool and diversity of the industry.
Can you tease apart for us the difference between traditional community solar? We have a very good community solar program here in Illinois, and now we have this community-driven community solar, though. What defines community-driven versus traditional?
Again, it's an emphasis on criteria that are set on law, and then we further elaborated in our long-term plan around things like ensuring that a project was developed in response to an RFP issued by a community organization or local government to develop community solar, commitments to having the subscribers to the project be within a certain geographic area versus where the project is. There's several other criteria as well. Again, it's emphasizing the community word in community solar rather than having, some places have referred to at times community solar, sometimes it's called shared solar. And that in some ways might be a more apt description for the traditional community solar projects.
Okay. And when it comes to schools, I'm personally developing school solar projects. If you're a school administrator, please reach out to me. I would love to analyze your rooftop. And, at the end of the day, rooftop solar reduces your power bill. It provides a learning environment for STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And then it also is bringing local jobs and tax benefits to a local community. But what did you perceive as the barriers, or do you perceive as the barriers to entry for public schools when it comes to adopting solar installations?
Well, I mean, prior to the changes in the adjustable block program to make this carve out for public schools, we were seeing participation of public schools in the program. So it's not like there was a barrier that kept them from participating. But again, I come back to the fact that they have different decision-making processes to ensure, the right contractors are selected, et cetera, things like that. And so I think to me, it's making sure that as schools go through their decision-making process, that they're not shut out by other types of projects that might be developed in filling up the capacity of the adjustable block program.
Yeah, I think that's the crux of it is private companies will have a different decision-making process and may sop up all of the capacity, so to speak. And so it's great to have a carve-out per se for schools. And we have 100 megawatts a year now, I think, for public schools. So that's a sizable allotment. Well, what else should we talk about? I want to talk about Solar for All. That program is now greatly expanded as well. That is a parallel universe to the adjustable block program, focused on low and middle income communities. What do you want to talk about regarding Solar for All?
I think you hit the key points of where it's focused on. One of the things that we've seen in Solar for All is that initially the uptake for projects being submitted that were coming from single-family low-income homes was very slow, and it has increased over the last year. One of the things, though, that we proposed in our most recent long-term plan that was approved by the Commission in July, and we finalized it in August, is a number of pilots to sort of see what we can do to reduce some of the soft costs around identifying low-income solar projects. And so we'll be running some pilots starting next year to sort of see what we can do to help with the customer acquisition costs for that program, and as well as things like whether or not there can be nominal expenses related to things like roof repairs, roof suitability. So my observation looking at low-income solar programs from around the country is that they take a while to get off the ground. And so I think we're seeing definitely that same curve here where it started slow. We're beginning to pick up steam, but we're certainly not the volumes that we hoped for. And I'm hopeful that the pilots that I mentioned, some other adjustments, things like we increased the rec prices a bit to appreciate the development costs associated with low-income solar. So hopefully those will begin to see and yield real benefits for the Solar for All program. Another interesting aspect of Solar for All that came out of CEJA was the concept of energy sovereignty, where the General Assembly had a real interest in wealth building in low-income communities. And so now a portion of the funds are reserved for projects that promote what's known as energy sovereignty, which is a complicated concept, but in essence is focused on the idea of local ownership, local control, and wealth building. Now, how to actually implement that is very complicated. We're still working out some of the details there. But again, I think there's going to be a real emphasis on energy sovereignty as a component of the Solar for All program going forward.
And now we're layering on some benefits from IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is federal legislation, which has carve-outs, for example, for energy communities. These are communities that have coal plants or coal mining facilities in them. And of course, we're going through an energy transition. Coal and natural gas plants are being shut down and replaced with solar, wind, and batteries. And so it's great to provide alternative jobs and career paths for the workers that are impacted by those transitions. And just so our listeners are clear, the Illinois Solar Program incentivizes the installation of solar at the residential, commercial, community, and utility scales. And looking at this fact sheet from SEIA, I have to say it's been a smashing success, especially last year. Now there's a massive influx of utility scale solar in Illinois. And this is really good for rural communities from a financial perspective. It's good for landowners. Landowners can triple their income by leasing their property to solar developers. It's great for the tax base, which is good for schools. And but then if you're a business owner, you can reduce your power bill by 50 to 75%. If you're a homeowner, same thing. Reduce your power bill by 50 to 75%. A consumer can save upwards of $1,000 a year by installing solar on their home. And if you're not a homeowner or if you have a shady roof, you can participate in community solar. And that is why community solar is so important, because not everyone can put or wants to put a solar array on their rooftop. So it is a comprehensive program. In our last few minutes together, Anthony, what else would you like to highlight in terms of successes and what you see as, the goods coming out of the program in the coming years? I will highlight that, according to the SEIA fact sheet, the solar industry has invested $2.7 billion in the Illinois economy, including $1.2 billion in 2021. So this is very good for our great state of Illinois. But what else would you like our listeners to know about the IPA and the adjustable block and Solar for All programs?
Well, one thing I was reflecting on as you were going through some of those numbers is just the change in scale that we've seen. So prior to the Future Energy Jobs Act, no one had an exact number, but the best estimates were that maybe there was 80 megawatts of solar installed in Illinois. When we had a previous solar program called the Supplemental Photovoltaic Procurement, if we saw a 100 or 200 kilowatt project in that program, that was a big deal. The scale has just shifted fundamentally. We're seeing utility scale solar projects at the 100, 200, one project even bigger than that. So we're seeing individual solar projects that are larger than the total amount of solar that hadn't been installed in Illinois through 2017. We're seeing plenty of 1 megawatt, sometimes even bigger distributed generation projects. The community solar projects are almost all 2 megawatts. We'll be increasingly seeing 5 megawatt community solar projects due to changes in the law. So I think, to me, one thing that's really exciting is just seeing how the scale of what's possible in solar has changed over the years. And this is really essential because we have an ambitious RPS to meet the climate goals that, change goals that we have before us. We need a lot of solar. We need a lot of wind. So being able to see that how the industry has developed to be able to produce these large scale projects, I think, to me, is one of the things that has been just a shift over the past few years, and one that I hope to continue to see going forward.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Clean Power Hour or viewing it on YouTube. We do have a great YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed, please go to cleanpower.group and hit that YouTube icon and subscribe to our channel. Of course, you can find all of our content on your favorite audio platform as well. So please give us a rating and review. Back to the show. Yeah, it really is night and day when you look back to 2017 versus 2021. And so these things work. and our program is an amalgam of programs that were developed on the East Coast and the West Coast, right? The coasts were the earlier adopters. We're by some measure about 10 years behind states like New York and New Jersey and California, but now we're catching up. We're a number 10 solar state in the country, and we have a good 10-year runway with CEJA now. So that is a great foundation, and I'm just so grateful to our legislators, to the Illinois Solar Energy Association, to all of the solar professionals who worked on this, and of course to you and your staff for stewarding the program so well. What other closing thoughts do you have? I'm sorry to see that you have that you are stepping down from the IPA, Anthony, and making a transition yourself. But what else should our listeners know about the program, especially, I guess, if they have not heretofore, been aware of the program? What should Illinoisans know about solar in Illinois?
Well, I'd like to start by saying I appreciate those words. My staff have worked incredibly hard over the past several years to implement these programs. We're really committed to ensuring that they are successful, and that's been a lot of hard work and long hours. Personally, for me, I've been at the IPA nearly 10 years, which is a long time. It was a long time to be a director of a state agency. So I plan to continue to be involved in the energy economy in Illinois going forward. I haven't yet decided what that looks like, but the IPA is in good hands going forward in terms of the team that we developed there. I think in terms of what consumers may be interested in solar, I think get multiple bids before deciding to install solar. Do your research. There's a lot of great resources out there before making decisions. One of the key things that we've done in Illinois is really have a model that is not prescriptive, that allows for different models for solar companies. So there's companies that will lease your system. There are companies that will sell your system. There's large national companies in the market. There's small and medium-sized solar companies with something like the equity eligible contractor block that we discussed. Now, if you're interested in more about the company that's installing your solar, that can also give you options going forward as that builds out, that you may want to look for an equity eligible contractor. So I think we have lots of options going forward, but again, it always comes down to these are major decisions for someone to make to install solar on their home, that it is worth taking the time and effort to do some research and make sure you know all your options.
Well said. And just to highlight, we do have now about 300 solar companies operating in Illinois. It's a very healthy economy. And of course, new companies are moving in every year or being started up. If you're a contractor, if you're an energy professional or an aspiring energy professional and you want to get better connected to the solar industry, please reach out to me. I'm Tim Montague. Just go to cleanpowerhour.com and hit the contact link. You can find all our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Please give us a rating and review on Apple and Spotify, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just click the YouTube icon at cleanpowerhour.com. And I want to thank Anthony Starr, the former director of the IPA, the Illinois Power Agency, for coming on the show again. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.